4-room, this room, the dining room, the 2 rooms upstairs, and it faced north. And that was the beginning 200 years ago. And Steve has done research on who built the house, who renovated the house again, who worked on the house. I mean, 200 years took a long time. And so he's going to lead us off by giving us his research. And then we are going to hear from Andy Whitted about the legendary Whitted family of plasterers. You know, in Orange County, we have a long time, 200-year family craftsman tradition. And that's going to be brought out. Seems like a long time, but you know, plastering is an ancient kind of thing. Leonardo da Vinci was painting the Last Supper on a fresh plastered wall in Italy 500 years ago. And so we're just carrying on this tradition. When you built a house in 1820, you needed a plasterer, you needed a carpenter, and you needed a mason. They didn't fool around with things like indoor plumbing and electricity 200 years ago. But we have with us here a wonderful carpenter builder, Charles Woods, who's going to take the research on up into the 20th century. And along with him, a wonderful mason, Ralph Mills, that Charles assures me personally knows everybody who did anything for the last 200 years. They are going to have a conversation. Then we will have question and answer from the audience. Carrie, can you handle chat questions from the Zoom audience?
I can.
We've got double this number out in Zoom. So if Zoom land, if you have a chat question, you can type it in. And then following the event of questions and answers, I'll come back to you and tell you what's next. So Steve, over to you.
Okay, well, welcome and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Betty Osmond, for all you do in the community and great research and history you do in the intro. And it's a real privilege to be here with Ralph and Charles and Andy here, men who really get it done. My family, it was a family of doers and could build anything, but unfortunately only about 1 out of 3 males could do that. I couldn't by aptitude or interest, but I do appreciate a job well done. I know it when I see it. These men do good, great work and have over the years. I'm Steve Peck, as she said. I'm a member of the Historic Hillsboro Commission, have been for 6 years now. And I've worked in and around Hillsboro in history really since I retired. I'm a member of the Orange County Preservation Commission, again, with humility, because my skills are much less than the others in that commission as well. But my interest in history comes out of that. So why are we here? Betty talked about the bicentennial, that William Adams purchased this property in late November of 1821 from the town of Hillsboro. 60 acres up here was in the town commons, and he bought these 2 lots, and this was called Newtown back in those days. Not many people up this way, and we know that the house came up here very quickly in 1822, hence 200th anniversary. We're sitting in probably the parlor, that the original part of the house. So we're here to commemorate that. We're also here as African American History Month. And my emphasis in looking at it was to say, how do we focus on the craftsmen who built Hillsboro, who built this house, who built so many things? I'm informed by a book by Catherine Bashir, who's very famous as an architectural historian. She wrote Crafting Lives about Newbern, North Carolina, and the Black artisans of that town. And you can almost substitute at times as you read that book, and I'd be glad to share the book, let you see what it looks like. You can almost substitute Hillsborough in a lot of places because it was a tremendous artisan community of African Americans who grew up, particularly after slavery ended. So who built the house we're sitting in today? This is an 1848 house that you're in. And in 1848, the Burwells had many children. The school was flourishing, and Robert decided they had to renovate and expand. So they hired the best builder in the town, John Berry, one of the great builders actually in the entire state at that time. In 1848, they hired him for $2,500. That's $90,000 about in monies today to renovate the house, and they doubled the size of it. And as Betty said, it was the orientation with the porch was right out there where the hallway is, and they changed the orientation of the house, and they doubled the size of it. And if you look at the diagram inside in the hallway, it's a blow up of a pencil drawing, which will show you what it looked like in 1850. That's the only representation we have of what it looked like back in the day. And who built it? Well, John Berry liked to build in brick, but he also had a couple of daughters, and I guess he accepted it because they went to school here. So he benefited from that. He also had a master carpenter, and his name was Joseph Nichols. And most of what was done here was carpentry, because this is a wood house. So it's without a doubt true that John Berry would have turned that over to Nichols as master carpenter and to his other enslaved workers. It's kind of an interesting misconception that if you were enslaved, you were in the fields. Not necessarily at all. Particularly if you were a builder, you owned valuable slaves, and certainly Joseph Nichols was valuable. He was named as my carpenter by John Berry in his will, who bragged about how much he was worth. And Nichols would have been the one who really did this renovation. And for that reason, I wanted to bring him to light, because we also, Betty and I and others found that looking at the cemetery census, that Joseph Nichols' grave, a graveyard, which used to be behind this house, is right behind the Hillsborough town office annex up on Corbin. If you drive the back of it, you now see a chain link fence, which his family maintained as their burial ground for many, many years. A tree fell on it, was overgrown. The Nichols family, some of it has died out, so there wasn't taking as much care as in the past, but the cemetery is still there. And Joseph Nichols is there, along with his wife, Harriet. So it really sparked an interest to see us clear that out and try and remember Joseph Nichols. He's also noted in the NC State blog, Builders and Architects of North Carolina. He's one of the few African Americans who's mentioned. He's mentioned mainly because the Berry family, which was a testament to what he did for John Berry, but also because of he had several relatives who lived quite a while in the area. So they were able to find out a fair amount about him word of mouth. It is, I think, the first time I looked at for Joe Nichols, one of the first places I found Joseph Nichols, and I mention this because it's very poignant to look at, is the Friedman's marriage records. And if you're not familiar with that, or if you're not, I briefly will tell you that in 1866, the state legislature in the wake of the Civil War passed a law that allowed you to declare if you've been married as a slave. The couples could come forward and be registered with the Register of Deeds. And it was supposed to be from April until the end of September of 1866. Joe Nichols and Harriet, his wife, they were the same age, both born in 1822. They came forward the first day. They paid their 25 cents, about $5 in American in money today, and got recorded. And they came forward with a host of other craftsmen who would show up in the 1870 census. If you step back and look at the 1860 census for Hillsboro, you'll see only a handful of builders and maybe a couple of carpenters named. No African Americans. You look at 1870, there were hosts of them, most of which were couples, people who had been married. There are a surprising number of them that you find in 1870. You will see in Friedman Bureau's records as coming forward. Some of those couples had been married 50 years in 1866. They were the oldest one on the record is 1860. Joe Nichols had been married 20 years to Harriet. She was under the Strayhorns, and they lived up at Twin Chimneys. And evidently, he resided there when he wasn't traveling the countryside with Barry and his building projects. But very poignant to look at. The Whitted family had 15 Whitteds who showed up on the Friedman Bureau's records, for instance. So it's a real testament to who he is. There are many other builders that show up in 1870. So Joe Nichols is more of a representative of them. One thing I note about the 1870 census is that two things evidently happened. They made the south side of the railroad here in Hillsboro part of the Hillsboro district. Before it had been a separate township. So in the census it increased, but the population of Hillsboro, what they call Hillsboro Township, jumped from roughly 900 people in 1860 to nearly 3,800. Even with the addition, that's still a jump. And the reason, of course, is that the enslaved freedmen flocked here together, and much of the area around Joe Nichols, if you look at the census, were other enslaved people who made their homes, and an awful lot of the craftsmen in the area lived up in the northern part of town here, in that area around where Joe Nichols was. So it's been a great journey to see them. By the way, again, there were 850 couples roughly so that would be probably well over 2,000 when you think about how large your families were that declared themselves married. And I'm sure that must be an interesting conversation. You know, the husband saying, "Oh, we'll go down there sometime." Wife says, "No, we're going right now." We know that Joe Nichols was respected. He continued to be a builder. In the early 1870s, he even went one night to Burnside, to Paul Cameron's house to take care of his son, Duncan, who was ill for nearly 60 days, I think, with fever. But evidently his attachment there that Joe Nichols shows up at Burnside and spends the night sitting by his bed. The boy recovered, by the way. But anyway, the other time we find Joe Nichols is on the jury in 1883, a murder case, and where he was an African-American man had killed his common law wife, and he sat on the jury in 1883. So we know he was alive then. By 1889, we get a notice in the Hillsborough paper that he was the late Joe Nichols, and they were referring to his real estate bounding somebody else's property up here, and they were saying this property has been sold and it bounds the property of the late Joe Nichols. So he lived a full life. His wife shows up even as late as 1890 in the census at 78 years old. So there's been a long history of African American crafts and sign up at that cemetery and preserve it to remember not only Joe Nichols, but all the enslaved craftsmen who emerged out of slavery, and families that continue to be a bedrock for this community and building in this community and on. I had a real wonderful time picking Andy yesterday about plastering, and found out from him that his father and his grandfather were responsible in the 1970s for the plastering you see in here, the restoration you see in here, particularly the plaster that was done out in the schoolhouse. Of course, I was hitting him up for a good estimate because after 40 years, the plaster out in the schoolhouse has begun to deteriorate, and we also needed whitewash. But nonetheless,
He has a warranty.
that's right. And I really appreciate the conversation, but the tradition of it lives on in the Whitted family. And with that, I'll turn that over to Dandy to talk more about that.
Okay, my grandfather, he was born in 1898. And he had a brother 2 years younger, Skeely. They call, you can say pronounce it Sly, but they call him Skeely. And my grandfather had, his name was Ransom. He had a son, Ransom. Then he had the next son, John, and then my father was Anderson. Then he had another youngest son, David. Then a real close helper was Haywood Fairboy. I worked pretty much with all of them. And then his brother Skeela, I didn't work with them much because his sons, they kind of traveled. When I got big enough, they were traveling, plastering around. But he had some sons. I know one was named Lester. But kind of backing up just a little bit, my grandfather's father was named John, and he was a clerk in the courthouse. And then my grandfather named a son John. He named his first son Ransom after him, and the next one was John. Then he named my dad's Anderson, which my name is Anderson. And he had an uncle, name was named Anderson. He kind of went to Pleasant Grove, but his family was a house on Market Lane there. His daughter was at Fawcett. She right across from the church there, the Stokoe house there. And he was a minister, and then my father was minister, so it fell on me too. But yeah, we worked together, and then like I said, it narrowed it down to end up out here in '78. My grandfather kind of helped us a little bit out there. But yeah.
I didn't tell you that two of the people we got in the Friedman bureaus of marriage were Anderson Whitted and Anderson Whitted Jr.
I saw that.
Two of those members.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah, I saw that when I was reading that.
And the older Anderson had been married since 1838, but he declared in 66, and the younger one had just gotten married in 1861. Yeah, the Anderson Whitted.
Yeah. So that was, I think, the one that lived down here. Yeah. Then he said he went to Pleasant Grove, saw the passing of church up there. Yeah. My grandfather used to talk a little bit, but we were trying to find me and Carrie. I was trying to find, never talked to Mr. Russell, Ralph a little bit here. My grandfather used to say he went to Petersburg a lot, but I never didn't really sit with him to really figure out who taught him. But I want to say it was somebody in his family was Petersburg, Virginia. He used to talk about going there a lot. And then he kind of come back here and trained his sons. And I had, John had some sons. He used to have Ransom, he had one daughter. And I had a brother help me son. And John had a son, John Jr. called Bubble. He helped some. Yeah, a lot of them ran from him because it's hard work. But I didn't have much choice. I had to keep
Most
it
of the
going.
bubbles ran.
So yeah, I
You
tried.
were talking about yesterday, the union work that you.
Yeah, my first two uncles, John and Ransom, they used to kind of do some union work, and they would some plasters out of snow camps, some guys out of Durham. They would get together and ride to Goldsboro, to the Army base, the hospital, bigger areas, and they would work one to drive a week, and the next one to drive. I used to hear them talking, and I would meet some of those guys later on. They were introducing to me. guy from Snow Camp was a Coble. And then it was some guys in Durham, Montgomery, Homer Evans. Then I was telling about a guy at Chapel Hill was a Reverend Burnett. He had a nice crew of guys working under him. Then we go ahead.
Andy, you probably gone back and done work after your father's been doing it. But also you done plaster work from way back, not knowing who the plaster work was done by.
Right.
And I always heard about horsehair plaster.
Yeah.
You run into that?
Yeah, when you're doing
When
yeah, when here was a lot of when they were using wood and lab, they were using the horsehair to mix with the brown coat mud, mix it up and just rub horsehair. It was kind of sort of make it bond. It's like we got a mud now called what Sherwall or Bond, and they got fiber in it. So
Fiberglass.
yeah, same thing. But yeah, running into a lot of horsehair. When we was out there, there was plenty of it in this building out there. Ran into when we were out there, it was a note, but I couldn't figure out. They had put it in the wall, but we couldn't figure out what it was. Somebody had wrote a note, but we couldn't quite figure it out. Stuck it in the wall. Yeah.
The plaster people, did they ever sign their work?
Say it again.
The plasters, they ever sign your work?
My brother, my brother used to get when we'd be up doing Stokoe chimneys with Charles and everybody, he would sign the top. I said, nobody getting back up here. But that was his, he would sign the top. Put some kind of message. He said, we never know.
Now the drones are finding them.
Yeah. He would sign them and put a message up there. Dated, you know, and then put something
Charles
small.
was better, baby.
Well, that was his thing, but I never really, you know, just done it and then word of mouth. People talk, you know, I rather hear the people be satisfied with my work, you know. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, when you were training, were you taught to do decorative plaster? You know, not just walls, but
Glad you said that.
the beautiful plaster that can go on. You know,
I run into a book my grandfather had. I needed to find it. It was a book they had where you had to go to school to be a plaster. And those guys were wearing bow ties, white shirts, black. So many years you had to apprentice and then to get to be a plaster. And they done, it was like all this just here. I think that's wood now, but that's what you talking about. They used to run for the track. It hit my mind when you said it. I'm glad you said we done a job in 1990, went through Wilmington, like he was saying, for security builders. The guy I was saying was his brother on Haywood Fairwell. We and him run into some. And he said, I said, show me, I never done it. We built a track and you just a wood track. I done something for Charles about 2 years ago. We done something. You just build a track and you mud it and you cut a board, just the same design, and you just keep.
Have you ever had to repair?
Yeah, that's why I said I done some repair. That's the way I do it.
That looks like it's harder than doing it fresh.
Yeah, it would be a little harder because you got to make that track, and then you make like a tool or wood.
Make a
tool.
template.
Yeah, template, metal or wood, and then you just keep mudding it. But the place in Wilmington, we done a lot, and then a lot of that was all tore out. They just went back to like a styrofoam thing, and they kind of put it like a small spray of mud and just smooth it. A lot of it just styrofoam.
Yeah, he rebuilt a wall for us. Actually, we had to cover up some crown molding. So then Andy came back in and formed the rest of the crown molding in plaster because the building was had plaster in it to begin with. That was down in Oxford, in downtown Oxford. But anyway, that turned out good. He asked me how to do it, and I said, well, I'll charge you if I tell you.
But yeah,
I'm a wood butcher.
Sure. But yeah, it's like a frame that you put it out of wood and you just run. Like, I mean, your carpenters and your plasters, you got to work together. I mean,
You just put the mud in there and then
yeah, just keep mudding and pulling it. Yeah. But I'm glad you said that, because that book, it was showing how they had to go to school, and so many years you had to go to learn to be an apprentice, and it wasn't no joke back then. When you was a plaster, you was a plaster. You know, they wouldn't let you eat, Ralph, know what I mean? I mean, you couldn't go in and get a job, a union job, unless you had your papers and all that stuff back then. I came along easy. But you had to show your paperwork and all. And it was amazing how they were dressed up, white shirt, black bow tie, and black pants. Yes, Charles.
Well, I think we should go to Ralph next, but I'll let Ralph close this out.
Ain't too much I can tell you.
Yeah, well, you'll
But
fill
I
in some,
laid brick for 60 years.
Yeah.
Ralph will fill in a lot of my blanks. But
Some
I'm
hard
Charles
work.
Woods, born and raised in Skeely. The way I look at it, Sly only has 3 letters, and that's S-L-Y. So, yeah, I was born and raised in Sly on a farm, and went to all the schools around here, raised a family. But in 1980, my father had to leave. Well, he didn't leave the farm. He went and got work in construction to help supplement his income. So he went to work for C.C. Woods Construction in the 60s, and we're no relation. And then in 1980, he had to retire because of arthritis. So he, my cousin had asked him when he retired, says, when you get the feeling better, will you add on an addition for me? I had gone to Orange High School, graduated in 1972, and I loved drafting, and I took a course to my junior and senior year. I took drafting under well, we call him Winky Roberts now, but he became a builder after, not just a few years. In fact, he did a project for Betty Eigner back there. But anyway, so then I went on to school and got a degree in drafting and design, and went to Charlotte and worked as a draftsman, then came back in 78, then got married in 79. But in 1980, I was doing anything to put bread on the table. I was cleaning houses. I had a squeaky cleaning service and tree topping, firewood, anything. So when my cousin asked my dad if he would add on, Daddy asked me if I would help him. And then he asked me, will you do it and let me help you? Well, I'd never built a house. I'd worked on barns and fences. So, yeah. So anyway, why not? So I go to a house that Winky Roberts had built, real good friends of ours. And I crawled up in the crawl space of that house, and I pulled down the insulation, and I took a pad and I drew out how that thing was put together. And then that was where Charles Woods Builder was started. So now I think I know how to build this thing, but how am I going to do the foundation, Well, my cousin had already hired Ralph. And so Ralph was my first mason and took me under his wing. And we've worked together for years and years, just like Andy and I have. So that's where we've done. I started in 1980, got my license in 82. So that's kind of the history of Charles Woods Builder. But Ralph and I have worked together on just numerous of projects, as Andy and I have. And if it wasn't for these guys, I wouldn't be up here today. So, and then the masons that worked for Ralph for years and years, they're now doing some work. Ralph's kind of slowed down. He still thinks he can work, but we try to keep him in a consultant position. So
No, I can't do much.
but anyway, we enjoy each other and love being around each other. So, but Hillsborough has been mighty wonderful to me, and I'm sure Andy will say the same thing in Ralph. But anyway, that's,
The work has changed, I tell you that.
Yeah,
It's a little easier now than it used
yeah,
to
yeah,
be. It used to be rough.
yeah,
yeah,
You talk about crawling out of them houses,
yeah, yeah.
rough.
So tell them a little bit about your,
Well,
where you got your start.
I got it from,
At the grocery store.
yeah, grocery store working at 12 years old.
Mm,
I kept begging for a job, begging, and they let me go for it. So I worked there about 6 or 7 years. Then they had an ice house.
yeah,
They tore the ice plant down. They had a little ice house. My uncle run that. So I kept on asking about getting me a job. So he let me work there for a while. So in the wintertime, fall comes. I had to find something else.
Yeah.
That's how I got into line brick.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was all in brick then. But my hands, I come home, I couldn't even pick up the business. Burn my hands up. So one of my friends, he said, you need to learn how to lay brick. He said, I'll show you. So that's how I got started. That was 1962.
wow.
Ralph, I was reading a book he gave me yesterday. It had Roosevelt Warner and Pete McPherson was basically the two that
I
pulled
worked
it
with Pete
together.
McPherson. He like a
Yeah.
Now, was he part of the McPhersons that taught brick?
Mhm.
Yeah, it was his
I'm
son.
trying to think of the house over there in Carolina. You built that house, you laying the brick on that house for some. I can't think his name, but one of them men, you know, big man. There was a lot of brick in that house.
Who built the house?
Pete McPherson.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, he couldn't think of the contract. He was trying to.
Yeah. I was trying to think of the brick contract. But it was a big house. It had a vast. Yeah.
Do you ever work with Roosevelt Warner?
Not much.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Warner Lane is, of course, over there is the lane between Orange and Porter. I assume his house is somewhere in that area.
That's the old man Roosevelt.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know, what, and the
That's
young
what
one was
it is.
Roosevelt too, right?
yeah, Ronnie, they call him.
Right, yeah.
What's his name? Roosevelt, they just call him Ronnie. Like you said, the McPherson guy, he had his son taught masonry at Orange High. His bit of Will, we call him Bubble. And then Ronnie went over there a few years and taught some too.
Ronnie Warner?
Yeah, he taught a few years, and then this other guy took over Stark Steel after him. You remember Stark Steel?
Yeah. He's the one that did the arrow down there at the courthouse.
Right.
He did the sidewalk around there.
He was stone, pretty much stone.
Oh, he did. Oh,
Yeah. He rebuilt Daniel Boone's arrowhead, or David Crocker, whichever one.
somebody drove over.
Somebody said, I'm leaving town.
But like Ralph was saying, is I get lonesome sometimes because you had all the Masons used to meet up here on the hill. And it was a part of Roosevelt teaching them and the McPherson. And it was a thing, Hillsborough Masons, you know, they were known for it. Mhm. Yeah. And,
Where did you meet?
up here, what they call it, chicken place now, don't they?
Oh, yeah, snack, yeah, Jack used to, yeah,
Jay's Chicken.
Jay's Chicken
Right.
Shack.
Yeah, you go there, you ask for Mason, I mean, they would be all there every morning, they'd be there early, and then you.
That's where I'd call up Ralph, well, let me round up some people.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Then it wouldn't be long, about 5 or 6 show up.
yeah, yeah. They had a place in Durham was like that too, you
Yep.
know, big
Yep.
pickup guys.
There was masons and then there was bricklayers.
Yeah, that's what I was saying a
So,
while ago.
you
Yeah.
know, that's-
It's a difference.
The ones that wore the bow tie, Ralph wore the bow tie. Ralph wore the bow tie.
You get them on the job, you can tell them about 15 minutes what you had, what you got. A real mason can lay a brick like Ralph and never put no mud on it. He done some work for my uncle, the baby David. All of his brickwork he called Ralph. Ralph, he wanted all black mortar. You can't wash no black mortar, that's because it would take the color.
Yeah.
Ralph laid it all neat, clean.
Black mortar. You both had a good-
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've always admired the masons and the plasterers because their shoulders must be massive.
Yeah, you can
I mean,
tell.
I'm gonna tell you,
Yeah.
you do that now, man, that's something.
Over here, this you feel it the next day.
Oh, my goodness. And their hands, mason's hands, reminded me of my dad's growing up. When Daddy would grab me.
Yeah.
Boy, that old hand rough. But anyway, yeah, I had the easy job, really. I rode around, rolled my window down about that far and said, y'all need anything? But anyway, we,
You didn't call me that out, no, rap. You done messed up.
when Ralph was doing my foundation on my house, so that's probably one of the last jobs you did. He said, Charles, I believe you got it too high. And I did.
Ralph used to work one of the last, Mike Ferguson was on his job. He kept him on the steps and the corners. You were a real mason if you could be the steps or corners.
Mr. Gert.
Yeah.
Mr. Gert. Yeah, Mr. Gert.
Yeah.
How about that? I'd forgotten about Mr. Gert.
Yeah.
Wow.
I tell you one thing, you learned me a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
Won't work with nobody but me.
How about that?
And if you, I've seen what the guy used to work with us, he was pretty strict. If you didn't do it straight that raw, he'd tear it all back out. I've seen the brick mason wasn't like that, tear it all the way back down, kick it over right in front of you if you wasn't doing. And it made you a real brick mason. It made you yeah. It'll mess with you, but hey, it ain't right.
I be doing something, he come up with that. What you doing, buddy? That ain't gonna work.
And fireplaces.
Yeah,
A real mason got to build a
right.
fireplace.
Gotta be real.
I remember a mason did a fireplace for me so quick that smoke come out on the ground.
You gotta maybe draw it out.
Yeah, right. It's got a curl. Eugene thought he could do one. At least he would tell you. Do you know Eugene? Started laughing.
Yeah, but he like Mr. Gert.
Yeah, he was neat. He was a neat
Oh,
mason.
let me tell you what.
Yeah.
As you look around town here, at some of the older brick buildings, which ones do you think stand out to you as being well done? Any of them stand out to you if you look at them?
I think all of them do. I
Well,
mean, yeah, the brick ones.
Yeah.
Because we're getting ready to do some work on that corner building on King Street, the one with the angled front door. And it has some brick falling out of
King
it.
and Church.
King and Church.
Yeah.
And when you just think about the age,
Mhm.
and it's not actually the brick that is messed up, it's the wood that's rotting around it. But yeah, I went down in the basement of that building, and man, it's just as dry and nice. And that lodge up there that across from the Colonial Inn, that's some of the prettiest brickwork.
Eagle
Yeah,
Lodge.
yeah. But all the brick buildings to me, see that corner building used to be wood. It was a wooden building.
Oh, I see.
And I think it was burned or something. I don't know the history of it, but yeah. But that's good brickwork out there.
Right there.
that school.
Samuel Hancock did that. Same one built Mary Brick House, or at least he helped
Mhm.
John Barry build that.
And didn't you say that this Joe Nichols did work at the courthouse?
Yeah, he probably,
would have been a
without that, he
tilt.
would have done part of a good bit of the interior carpet. Framing it. It would fall right in his wheelhouse from when he was active with Barry.
This is not changing the subject, but you said somebody had written a note on
Yeah.
the plaster. We're doing a project now right on the corner of Margaret Lane and Hillsborough Avenue, the Ruck House. That just beautiful. I always wanted. But anyway, we were doing the demo and we pulled off a bunch of plaster. Now it has plaster board. It has plaster board on it. So on the through the wall, which would be the inside of the carpenter had written a note in 1999, and it said, "Stock market has hit 10,000 today. I have no idea what that means. I'm just a carpenter." So I sent it to my friend Tom Rankin, who is a photographer, and he said, "Don't cover it up. I gotta take a picture. I gotta take a picture of that." So I just, and you know, I felt I should have put amen. I have no idea what that means. I don't care if it's 40,000 or if it's 10,000. But we got a kick out of that. But we've seen notes and walls and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
They didn't do much stucco around here, did they?
No.
That's mostly outside. Trying to figure. Old corner place up here, Stoker. What is that building up here on the corner? It was a service station, it's an office building.
Sinclair.
Yeah, that's Stoker. That's old Stoker. This building down here was a service station right by the Dixie.
Right,
Yeah,
golf.
that was a lot of the service stations, I guess. Back then, they were doing some Stoker outside.
But
Do y'all have anybody that's being trained to do plaster and brick work? I mean, are there people following along in their trades?
I got
Not
two.
many.
No, I got two sons, like he's saying. But I told Carrie about 2 years ago, when Durham Tech first opened over here, a lady called me and some homeowners wanted to learn, and she would ask me would I be willing to come and do a class, and I told her yeah, but it never did go through because of, say if you should 30 room, these could have 16, 17. She didn't give it 8, so it never did go through. Yeah, I was just want to sort of teach some of the people that some people was asking for. She said. Go ahead.
My question is, all of you have long histories in this part of the world. Did your families know each other back in the day?
Yeah,
So your relatives and your relatives and your relatives were all being part of Hillsborough back in whenever they
Right.
y'all
as
started.
good as we could.
Just wanted to know.
Yeah.
Ralph's sister stay right across from me. I've been there all my life, and she's been right there.
Nice, so.
Yeah,
Everybody-
I've known Andy for many years. I didn't meet Ralph until I started my first job. Because I wasn't in the business and my dad wasn't in the business.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
but yeah, I wish there was some
Yeah.
way
Yeah,
that not for the historical value of learning and having, but plaster. I mean, but drywall came along.
yeah.
It just took the place of plaster.
Drywall came probably late 50s, took
Yeah.
it on. Yeah,
But yeah, we've done work. Andy's done work on split lath, and then it went
Yeah.
to sawed lath,
yeah,
then the plaster board.
And I'll put a plug in for the next iteration of our bicentennial. We're talking about, we're having a 19 and before brick workshop, which is the old way brick was done before modern brick and modern mortar. And that'll be on May 17th. We're having a brick, we're having Wayne Thompson, who even knows him, who was one of the specialists in the old brick and how you do that. He will come and do our necessary out there. The outhouse we have, which is a 1837 outhouse, it needs to be repointed the brick. He'll do that, and then Peter Sandback and Todd Dickinson will be at the Masonic Lodge, Eagle Lodge, to talk about preservation generally in Hillsboro. That's I think it's May 17th. Am I right?
14th and 15th.
15th, okay. 14th and 15th, pardon me. But one thing that Wayne is very good about, Wayne Thompson, he's probably one of the real worldwide specialists in the oldest brick and how you have and the special needs of those bricks. If you have that kind of house and you've ever tried to repair your brick and you've got a 19th century house that was 19th century brick, and I guess well to repair those is different than a modern brick. It's a different art.
Yeah.
Is it a different clay? I mean, I don't know anything about anything you guys have talked about.
Well, I'll
Do
do
that test.
I'll defer to you, but y'all, but if I understand it, about 1925, they came up with a new kind of mortar to set the brick that allows you to fire the brick harder than it was heretofore, all the way back in Roman times. They basically the same technique until the 20th century. Am I wrong? Am I telling that right?
Yeah, they didn't have sacks of mortar like they do now.
Yeah.
They used lime and something else,
Yeah.
sand.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else they mix with it, but
Hey, your brick, like he said, those old, I'm sorry, there's different size, like,
Right, they were smaller
yes,
and rounder.
yeah, some of them, they were different sizes. Yeah.
So it's the way they got fired combined with different clays that created new bricks versus
Hill-
old bricks.
Yeah, and Hillsborough used to have a brick factory. In fact, when we built, it's my understanding, when we built the house up on the hill at the corner of Hassel and King, which was the old Dr. Roberts' house that burned. We think that there was a brick, they made those brick right off the meat, because that was some brittle brick. That was it was really brittle, and it'll if it's left out in the weather now, it just kind of goes back to mud.
Mhm.
So that brick factory is over next to where Sheets is. And I went in there a couple of years ago. And some people here in town want to resurrect, have a historical marker, because you can still see a lot of the makings. I mean, if you go in there during the winter, so there won't be snakes, but it is just amazing. It's so much in the office. Have you been in there?
No, I know. Great.
Where's that?
Yeah, I know it is.
It's right beside, if you go to Sheets and
Sheets.
you look to the east,
Mhm.
and you go where they're gonna build all these in a CJG place, and then the woods, and that woods. Palligoris owns that part, the guy that used to own the truck stop. But
Okay.
it is so interesting.
I didn't know that.
I've not gone very far in there, but somebody here in town, I think she called Peter out on that. Peter Sandback maybe here, but they were trying. I think they took the Orange County Preservation Mission, thinking that whole area we could do something about preserving it. Unfortunately, it was not really something that you could do anything about. Orange County Commission, it just. But when I went there, it was summer and really.
Oh, yeah.
I meant to go back and haven't done that, but it's a fascinating story. And I think Peter and Todd Dickinson, some of you may know him. He did restoration work on Airmount in the early part of his time in the business. A preservation contractor. He did Airmount, one of his first ones, and he and Peter both are speaking to preservation. But then the day before this, at the brick workshop we're having, if you're interested in how they fired those brick and so forth, Wayne Thompson does part of that inside, we do inside the old school. And he'll speak to that because Wayne's kind of a disciple of the old brick. And he knows it very well. So he will be willing to talk about that. We have a limited registration for people who can actually do hands-on. And he will teach some hands-on during that day. But he'll also go to classroom. I don't think it'd be a problem with dropping in if you're interested in that. For that time, then the next day, we'll be up at Peter and Todd will be up at the Eagle Lodge and speak to preservation generally and in the area and so forth. But anyway,
Well, one more thing, didn't they make the brick for Airmark on site? Didn't they?
It was handmade brick.
They were handmade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law's uncle or something, he made brick in it. David.
Yeah.
David's, was daddy or uncle or what? But they were close.
Yeah.
if you read Gene Bradley Anderson's book on Air Mount, you know that they had a lot of suspicions about who built it, but they're not really. It's not really totally clear who did and where the brick came from. It's not totally clear. There were brickyards down on the river here. This one, for instance, the 1830 school behind us, the 37 school. We know Samuel Hancock had a business with Dr. James Webb because we have receipts that Webb asked for a number of brick on that to be delivered here. I think I'm right about that, Sylvia. And so Hancock's Brickyard, which was down on the River off Margaret Lane. But it's a handmade bricks. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I served on the property committee for First Baptist Church here in Hillsborough. And we had some plaster work had to be done. I asked one of our parishioners, Chip Liner, I said, who can we get to do plaster? I said, well, you got Andy Whitted. I said, got anybody else? Andy Whitted. And then came along and did the work for us. And then it came along, we needed some brickwork done on the sanctuary. And so I got referred to Wayne Thompson. And Wayne will tell you, he doesn't work on anything after 1900.
Yeah, that's right.
1900.
I don't think I've ever met.
Our brick, the brick at First Baptist was 1860s.
Yes.
He
Sanctuaries.
did some stuff.
I was getting lined up with Wayne on our job. I was conversing with him. He was going to work for the federal government on a restoration job in Charleston.
Yeah.
He travels all over doing the work.
How old a man would he be?
He's our age. Just made it approach
40. Wow, that's good.
I give you kind of thought about me what the guy is. When we initially asked him to do the workshop a year ago, he said, well, I decided to build a boat and sail around the world. And then we asked him again, Peter Sandback, about it. He said, when he delayed his trip, because his father was ill and he decided he'd delay it for a year. But he thought he'd be going through the Panama Canal about it in May. And so we weren't going to get Wayne, but we were going to get Todd and Peter, both of which are pretty good at this.
Todd did the historical restoration work.
Yeah.
So we do have some comments from Zoom, if I can share that with you guys. Peter responded about the brick factory. He said, that was a major brick factory in late 19th and early 20th century. The old kilns and machinery are still there in the woods. Used to be a trail siding to that factory. Pip Merrick has studied it extensively as well.
That's right.
And then we do have a question. The question is, I understand that most houses now that are brick are actually frame houses with brick covering. When did this change from structural brick happen?
I
25?
I would say in the 20s, 30s, became brick veneer.
We used to live in Sanford, and Sanford is the brick capital of North Carolina. And we had a brick house that was built around 1930. And we had, this is a long story, but I'll make it short. We had the downstairs bathroom had a peach colored bathtub and a lilac colored sink and a pink toilet, or some combination of that. There were 3 different colors. And I wanted someone to come and take the bathtub out because it's easy to replace the sink and the toilet. And the guy came and he said, "Lady, you've got 18-inch brick walls, and that's a cast iron tub."
What was that last?
What do you want me to tear down? So we found some wallpaper that incorporated those 3 colors.
Yeah. That's some work there.
Absolutely.
I lived in a house in Yanceyville for a while that was built in the 1830s. It was double layered of brick.
Yeah.
Was that a common thing?
Yeah.
In the 1800s?
Yeah.
To be 2
The
layers?
set that the 18-inch, that would probably be close to three, and they'd lace them.
Yeah.
4 courses of brick, 4 different bricks.
Yeah.
I done pulled a wall out downtown there. Boy, it took me a while. Put a door in there.
Right. So the brick you see now, and I don't know all the different bonds. There's the English bond, the Flemish bond, and all that different kinds of bonds. But where you see it's my understanding, and Todd would be able to, and Wayne, but you see a brick, and then you see the end of a brick. Well, that brick goes all the way through the way they used to do it. So it's tying that wall together.
You have other questions?
If there are any other questions to our Zoom participants or anyone in the room?
Wayne, have you done stone masonry?
No.
That's a different animal altogether.
Yeah. I have done it, but
You didn't go find it, did you?
One of his helpers tore it down when he finished it. But there are some good stonemasons around here.
yeah, it is.
Well, like Chip is a stone
Yes,
mason.
Chip
Yeah.
Liner is a
Yeah.
stonemason.
About bad, there was 18-inch wall.
Yeah.
The one downtown, yeah. I had to have a saw, drill.
Yeah.
So is this area so heavy with brick because of the clay and then go down east not as much, or is there any tying in there at all?
I mean, me being still in the 40s, in my 40s, but we got a lot of brick from Sanford.
Yeah.
We got a lot of brick from Sanford.
Yeah.
So I'm really,
How about back in the older days, 1820s, 1830s?
Well, certainly.
They weren't shipping brick across the state.
There were a lot of clay here, certainly with brickyards really down on the river, at different times, sometimes 2 and 3 brickyards. The Hancock and Webb brickyard was pretty famous in the early days. And that's where the brick came from for the 1837 brick schoolhouse and this outhouse we have, brick outhouse, which you can go to the back wall and see how deep it is. I think it's 2 layers here. But yeah, I think there was that certainly and became popular. Air Mount really started that. Air Mount was one of the first brick buildings in the area, but John Berry came along. He liked brick, and then Matthews, the Eagle Lodge, and of course, and the courthouse. But there was a brick courthouse even before the second or third brick courthouse. Now I can't remember. I mean, the third courthouse I think is what is now Dickinson Chapel. was drug up, and that was built in the 1790s. But before that, they had a bread courthouse that burned. So they were building with brick in 1780s, certainly
Yeah.
in this area, but it became incredibly popular with air mount, which was circa 1800, 1805. And then it kind of took off. Berry, who was he and his enslaved artisans, craftsmen, he liked brick. He'd been trained in it and knew what it was all about.
Where was he trained, around here, you know? Or-
He learned on the job, really. And some people think Samuel Hancock, who was a man James Webb had a interest supposedly in his business, brick business, and that Hancock provided this. But Hancock lived across the street from him on Queen Street, across from the Berry Brick House, where John Berry came up. And he helped build that house for Berry's mother, but that's when Berry was very young. And he learned from brick masons here. So Samuel Hancock was his mentor.
So currently, if you have a brick home, it's a brick veneer. And that's still more costly than a wood house. But back in the 1800s, when this was built, was it more costly to build a wood house or a brick home? Who would know?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't. There were still an awful lot of wooden houses here. I mean, certainly the Bingham House, which sat right across here, was now up Union Street. That was a frame house, just one close by, and that was good.
Well, since you said that, when I have go in houses, say the building we done in Oxford, money running out, you might have the walls downstairs slick, upstairs they had like a sand finish plaster, a little cheaper, and you would see this what do you call that board? Stick beaded board. Yeah, they would do that instead of plaster when they didn't have.
Yeah.
Less expensive.
Yeah. Plaster was real expensive.
I would think on the brick versus wood, it's just probably back then, just like it is now.
Yeah,
If someone said, well, we would like a brick house, because we don't want to do maintenance, let's say they said the same thing that we say now. Well, the way they built brick houses back then, they built them brick. Everything was brick. So framed house, I mean, I don't think they would even have thought about brick veneer back then,
It is interesting to think about Mount Vernon as an iconic site. Mount Vernon is built with wood, although it's designed, when you look at it, they've etched the wood to make it look like it's built out of stone. This is the father of our country's house, and it was considered fashionable back in the day that they built the house out of wood, but they made it look like it was a white stone granite block, I guess, or whatever it was.
I see something like that.
Yeah.
Just like snow.
I was gonna say, the question came up about where brick plants were. And worked a lot of my work life in Georgia and South Carolina. And on the fall line, between the Piedmont and coastal plain, there are typically rich clay deposits through that area. And that's typically where your brick plants came out. You have the clay there.
Yeah.
So, we live in the Ash House, which is around 1840s, and the foundation of it is stacked stone. So how common was that in those older houses?
We work on a lot of houses, stacked stone foundation. We're actually working right across the street now, and it has old brick foundation down in the basement.
Tamarind,
Tamarind.
right. Yeah. That's a 1900 house.
But yeah, that's common even in Chatwood. There was that's stacked stone like that. You don't want to cut through that thing.
But it is just stacked.
Yeah.
It's not mortared
Right.
together.
One interesting thing about this house, which you may not know, is if you go down the root cellar, you'll find that roughly under where the chest is out there, the large chest in the hallway, there's a massive stone, stacked stone foundation down there. That's much bigger than this table.
Yeah.
Directly under that. And I don't know if it was because of a fear there was going to be a shifting when they rebuilt the house or renovated the house in 1848. But take a look at it sometime we open that door. It's a fairly substantial stacked stone foundation in the root cellar.
All righty, well, I only because of time marching on, am I going to interrupt this conversation because it's fascinating. And I really appreciate all four of you being here and sharing your stories and your expertise. It is wonderful. Let's give them and for each of you, we have a gift. We have a picture of the Burwell School on a piece of wood. So it stands up like this. You can go home, set it down somewhere and say, oh, okay, this is Burwell School. And this is the research that I was telling you about earlier that we did, the research committee did, Steve did most of it. And this has in it names of builders, even in addition to what we've heard this afternoon. And most of this is from the census. If you are a person that likes to look at the census, what happened was the Smithsonian, of course, stores the census for all of us. It belongs to us, it's ours. And it lives in Washington and the Smithsonian. But the people out in the West decided they would digitize it. And so they digitized it, and the people who own Ancestry.com decided that they would put it on Ancestry.com. So to get to the census, what you do is you go to Ancestry.com and you say you want to do a search, and you type in a name like Anderson Whitted, and it will tell you everything in the world about Anderson Whitted, and you'll find out. You'll find out also, if you like me, and I'm doing research, I love it when there's a little girl named Begonia, but usually little girls are named Sally. And you'll find out that there's a Sally Smith in every town in every state in the entire union. So you have to know what you're looking at.
But only one Andy Whitted.
Well, so this little rolled up piece of paper here, which is in the basket for everybody to get one. And those of you on Zoom, if you want one, let us know and we'll see if we can make that happen. So this has got in it from the different census information from, when did you start, Steve? 1860?
Well, yeah.
About 1860 up to 1930. But this is exciting news for those of us who are 40, which is the 1940 census is going to be released in April.
1950.
1950?
1950.
1950 census is going to be released in April. That's right. 1940 is out. But of course, I'm not in that one. But I might be in the 1950.
I'm just about.
So you can add to this information yourself.
Let me add one thing to that. That's what to look at. I mentioned the Friedman Bureau marriage records. That is in the Wall Research Group Library in the Orange County Library. And you can't check it out. If you can see it, that somebody recorded the digitized Massachusetts and North Carolina archives, and it is there. It's a fascinating read. I would recommend anyone who's interested in African American history of the families and couples to go look at that. It really was quite moving to read.
And I would like to invite you to join us next door in the dining room for reception. And I would also like to invite you when you're in the hallway, if you have extra bill in your pocket this afternoon, please drop it in the donation box. Because Vicky, go ahead.
So, if we're donating to the Burwell, what's the thing that we need most right now?
Money.
Steve, what?
I shanghaied Andy Whitted into looking at the plaster, for instance, in the new old, from schoolhouse, which his family did 40 years ago, is in desperate need of that. I know that we're talking thousands of dollars to get that done. And certainly if you can donate to Burwell, this old house has always got something that's going on. And we always need help, and precious money's coming to us. And Andy was, as I said, remember, he's been good enough to give us a good price, but we still have to pay him what he
But he has a good warranty, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Charles will thanks all the
I saw $1 out there.
All right, thank you all very much.
And if any of you are wondering, this is how we act on the job. We set these up on the step and I'm on the ground.
Or you have pickup truck, you know what I mean?
Especially when it's hot. I only roll them up.